Before he was the most respected filmmaker alive, Christopher Nolan made a movie for $6,000. He shot it on weekends over the course of a year because his actors had day jobs. He edited it on his own equipment. He submitted it to festivals that rejected it. He kept going, not with some grand vision of what he'd become, but with the quiet, grinding certainty that the skill he was building had to go somewhere. Nobody was watching. Nobody cared. The years between that $6,000 film and his first studio feature were invisible years. Years that produced no status, no validation, no proof that what he was doing would amount to anything. Those invisible years are where the long game lives, and they're the years that 99% of people refuse to endure. Schopenhauer wrote that talent hits a target no one else can hit, but genius hits a target no one else can see. The self-taught man playing the long game is aiming at something invisible. Not to the world, to himself. He can feel it. He knows something is being built, but he can't point to it, can't measure it, can't show anyone a chart that proves the trajectory is real. All he has is the work and the gut-level knowledge that the work is accumulating into something, even if the something doesn't have a shape yet. That's the first thing the credentialed world doesn't understand about the self-taught man. He's not following a path. He's cutting one. And a path that's being cut for the first time doesn't have mile markers. There's no syllabus, no graduation date, no institutional voice telling him he's on track. There's just the next day. And the question the next day asks is always the same. Are you still here? The self-taught man who becomes elite is the one who answers yes long past the point where the question stopped feeling rhetorical. The long game costs more than people think. Not in money, in identity, in the social death of being the person who can't answer the question, so what do you do with anything that sounds impressive? The person whose parents worry, whose friends quietly move on, whose peers from school are collecting titles and salaries and visible proof of progress, while he's collecting hours of unrecognized work in a room nobody visits. Schopenhauer understood this isolation. He argued that the will, the driving force underneath all human life, pushes people toward immediate satisfaction, toward what's visible, rewarded, and socially validated right now. The long game runs against the will's natural current. It demands that you sit in deprivation, while the will screams for relief, that you choose invisible progress over visible comfort, that you tolerate the specific kind of suffering that comes from knowing you're building something real, while the world treats you like you're building nothing. Most people can't tolerate that suffering, not because they're weak, because the suffering has no guaranteed endpoint. Delayed gratification assumes the gratification is coming. The long game makes no such promise. It asks you to invest years, your best years, your most energetic years, the years when everyone around you is accelerating, into something that might never pay back. And the only people who survive that bet are the ones who aren't playing for the payoff. They're playing because the work itself became the thing they can't stop doing. The result, when it finally arrives, is almost secondary. Almost. The self-taught man develops something during those invisible years that formal education cannot produce. Not a skill, a relationship with learning itself. School teaches you to learn in someone else's structure. Here's the subject. Here's the material. Here's the test. Here's the grade. The learning is mediated, filtered through curricula, professors, institutional priorities. You're learning, but you're learning inside a container someone else built. And that container shapes what you learn, how you learn it, and most importantly, where you stop. The self-taught man has no container. He goes directly to the material, no filter, no syllabus telling him what's important and what to skip, no grade telling him he's understood enough to move on. He has to judge his own understanding. He has to find the gaps himself. He has to sit with confusion longer because there's no teacher arriving in an hour to resolve it. And that extended contact with confusion, that discomfort of not knowing without anyone to rescue you from it, produces a depth of understanding that mediated learning rarely reaches. He doesn't learn about the thing, he learns the thing. And over years, that distinction compounds into something the credentialed world can sense but can't replicate. A fluency, an intuition, the ability to move through problems without needing a framework because the problem itself became the framework. That's what a decade of self-teaching produces. Not information, integration. The kind of knowing that lives in your hands, not just in your head. The credentialed man gets a 5-year head start, sometimes 10. He walks into rooms the self-taught man can't enter. He gets meetings the self-taught man can't get. He collects opportunities that require institutional stamps the self-taught man doesn't carry. For the first stretch of both their careers, the credentialed man is winning. Visibly, measurably, in every way the world counts. And then something happens. The credentialed man plateaus. Not because he stops trying, because the system that launched him also capped him. It taught him how to operate inside existing structures, but never how to build new ones. It gave him fluency within boundaries, but not the ability to erase them. His knowledge has edges, defined by the institution, trimmed by the curriculum, shaped by what was considered relevant at the time he was being taught. The self-taught man has no edges, because nobody told him where to stop. His knowledge grew in the shape of his curiosity, not in the shape of a program. And by year 10, year 15, the shapelessness that looked like chaos in the early years has become a web of understanding so interconnected, so unusual, so impossible to replicate through conventional training, that the credentialed man can't compete with it. Not because he's less intelligent, because his intelligence was trained inside a box. And the self-taught man never knew the box existed. Schopenhauer wrote that every truth passes through 3 stages. First it is ridiculed, then it is violently opposed, then it is accepted as self-evident. The self-taught man's career follows the same progression. The early years are ridicule. Who does he think he is? Building without permission, learning without credentials, aiming at something nobody else can see. The middle years are opposition. The system resists him because his existence threatens the premise that institutional approval is necessary. And then one day, without transition, without apology, the world looks at what he's built and says, of course. That progression takes years, sometimes decades, and the man who survives it doesn't survive because he believed in himself in some motivational poster-on-the-wall way. He survived because he had no alternative. The long game wasn't a strategy he chose. It was the only game available to a person with no credentials, no network, no institutional backing, and no exit. He played it because every other table was closed. And that's the part nobody tells you about the self-taught men who become elite. They didn't choose the long game because they were wise. They chose it because the short game was never available to them. And the absence of a shortcut forced them to build something that shortcuts can never produce. A foundation so deep that the thing standing on it couldn't be knocked down by anything the world has ever thrown at it. The invisible years weren't the obstacle. They were the entire education.